Good morning, everybody. Today would have been the day that we would start dissecting our pigs, and again, I'm sorry that we can't right now. I do promise you that as soon as all this is over, we will absolutely dissect these pigs. So I wanted to at least show you what this technique looks like and kind of what this whole process looks like. So I'm just going to give you a warning. There's some graphic nature in the video to come because there is a real pig getting dissected in this video. So just a warning, but this is what the procedure looks like, because we definitely need to take some time and talk about kind of how this process works and what it is we're looking for during this time that we're online as well. That way when you come back, we're ready to roll. So again, this would be the time that we'd start dissecting, and next best thing is at least see what it looks like. So here you go. Oh, also I do want to add, when you're done with the video, please let me know that you saw it. That's how I'm taking rolls. So just shoot me a message that just says saw it.
Okay, we've got our pig in the tray ready to go, ready for dissection. We've got our tools over here. Let me explain what we've got. We've got a scalpel. This is going to be used only for our initial dissection. We won't need it at all after that. We have our scissors, and we have a sharp probe. You want to be careful because the end of this sharp probe is actually sharp and it can poke through your gloves. You want to make sure you don't poke yourself with that. We also have a blunt probe, which is nice and safe. These are great for pointing to things and helping in dissection. Then we also have what are called forceps. They look just like tweezers, but in a surgical room they call them forceps. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out first if our pig is a male or a female. Oftentimes when people look at pigs, they see these little dots and they go, oh, this pig has nipples, it must be a girl. Well, just like humans, both males and females have nipples, so that's not an indicator. The second thing people look at is this blue pouch, this blue spot right here, and they think, oh, that must be a male because it's got this blue thing here, and that blue thing is actually the umbilical cord. There's a couple of things we're going to look for. Let me use the blunt probe to show you. What we're going to do first is we're going to look at the underneath the tail, and underneath the tail you can see this hole that's here. This is the anus, and what we would look for is above the anus if there's another little hole kind of in, I'm trying to get the tail out of the way, kind of in this area. There'll be a little flap or a little hole. If you have something there, then it's a female. This one does not have that, so this is a male. There's a couple of things that we do see because this is a male. One is this area that is a bit darker and a little bit protruded. This is where the testicles will distend from the body. Also, if we go back up to the umbilical cord area, we'll see if we pull the umbilical cord forward, we have this tiny hole here. This tiny hole is where the urethra for the pig is at, and so this is also an indicator that this is a male. So now that we know that we have a little boy, we're going to go ahead and go into the abdominal cavity. To go into the abdominal cavity, you're going to use your scalpel. This is the only time you'll use your scalpel. The reason why you don't want to use a scalpel other than this is because once you're in the abdomen of the pig, you don't want to be using something this sharp and this pointed and much more difficult to control. So once we're done using this, we'll go to scissors. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab the umbilical cord and you're going to lift, and you'll see how I'm lifting really firmly. You don't have to be delicate. The pig has really tough skin. So right in front of the umbilical cord, you're going to make an incision right inside. So when we make this incision, we're not going to cut forward, we're just going to go straight inside. And sometimes you'll actually feel it penetrate, but you want to pull up. Now, once I've made that incision, I'm going to put my scalpel down. I'm going to get my forceps, and I'm going to put my forceps inside that little hole, and I'm going to see if I've gone all the way down inside. Can you get nice and close there? If you've gone all the way down inside, you'll see how it's dark inside there. See how it goes all the way down into that area. Once you've done that, you know you're in far enough and you don't need your scalpel anymore. So you're going to put your scalpel away. Then at this point, you're going to do everything from here on out with your scissors. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the bottom portion of your scissors, you're going to slide it into the hole, and then you're going to lift and cut toward the pig's head, not down into the body. Again, you're going to lift, insert your scissors, lift, point it towards the pig's head, and you're going to snip. Then what you're going to do, this is a lot of people kind of get grossed out by this, but what you're going to do is you're going to take your finger, you're going to put it in that hole, and you can actually see, let me grab forceps and you can actually see inside. See how you can actually see inside this area? There's the body cavity that we're going into. What you want to do is you want to stick your finger inside and you want to actually feel pushing your finger toward the diaphragm. Now my finger will go all the way up to right about there. So I can't go past that point because that's where the diaphragm is. So what I want to do is I want to make one more cut. So again, I'm going to lift, put my scissors in, lift, and cut toward the pig's head. Now, once I've done this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my pig sideways because I'm always going to cut away from myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use either forceps or my fingers. Your fingers are actually really good dissecting tools. And I'm going to make a snip toward the side of the body so I come around the umbilical area. And then once I've made that cut about out to where the nipples are, then I'm going to turn my pig again with the head toward me because I'm again going to cut away from myself. So what I'm going to do is I lift the umbilical cord, and I'm going to put the scissors underneath the skin, and I'm going to cut down along the nipple line toward the groin area of the pig. And you can see how I've cut all the way down in that area. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the pig sideways again with the pig towards my right hand side this time. And again, I'm going to lift the umbilical cord. Now, you'll notice here, let me show you something that we're trying to avoid cutting. If I turn this sideways, you'll notice there's this tube-like structure here. We're going to try to avoid cutting that. So what I'm going to do is when I put my scissors in, I'm going to lift. I'm going to put my scissors underneath between that vessel and the skin. You can see how my scissor point is under there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out toward the nipple. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is turn my pig again so the head is toward me. I'm going to lift, and you can see the umbilical vein is safely out of the way. It's over my finger in this area. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my scissors in and cut along the nipple line all the way back to the groin area. And you can see the last pair of nipples are here. That's about where I'm cutting to. So you'll notice this flap is still attached. One of the things that you're going to have to identify is this structure. So we're going to identify that now. That is the umbilical vein. So what I'm going to do is, and you know it's a vein because it's blue, and that you'll be given further instruction on that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this so I can lay that back out of the way. You'll also notice at this point that there's liquid inside this pig. This liquid is not from the pig. This is dissecting fluid. If you get a lot of this stuff and you want to get rid of it, what you can do is ask your partner to give you a paper towel. And what you can do is you can actually squeeze your pig and you can actually dab this. And you can actually put your paper towel in and around that area to get rid of that extra fluid. It'll help with the smell in the room, and it'll also help with your dissection process. So we're just going to soak that up with a paper towel. So we're going to dab our pig, make sure that we've got as much of that fluid as we can. Get out of there. We're going to put that in the trash can. So now what you're going to do is you're going to come down to where you've cut to. Again, I'm going to put my pig to the right-hand side, because what I'm going to do, let me show you with my blunt probe, I'm going to go from the end of my cut, I'm going to come up around the hip, and then I'm going to go straight down, all the way down, almost to the tray. Please make sure that when you're using these dissection trays that you don't poke this rubber mat. These are brand new, and we want to make sure that we keep them in good condition. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors for that, and you're going to put your scissors in, again, lift, and cut. You're going to come around you can see how it lifts up in here. You can see how you're going to get right up underneath there. You're going to get a hold of that with your scissors and cut. You're going to get a hold of that again with your scissors and cut. get a hold of it again with your scissors. Now you'll notice inside here, and this is where I want to keep my hands out of the way so you can see, you've got all this stuff here. You want to make sure you're not cutting that. So as you're cutting, you want to make sure that you lift away from all of those organs and cut all the way down to almost down to the pad. And you'll see that this opens up quite a ways. While we're here, what we can do is we can come up to the top, to about where the top nipple is. You can see a nipple right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut across. And you'll notice sometimes it's a little difficult because sometimes you end up going through ribs. We're going to go all the way down to the dissecting tray, and we're going to lay that out. Notice I'm not cutting off any parts. We're going to leave everything intact. So now that we've got this part, what we're going to do is this side of our pig is opened up. We're going to turn our pig 180 degrees around. So we're going to put the head where the feet were and the feet where the head was. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to move my umbilical cord and all of this stuff to one side. Do not cut this off. These are structures you're going to identify later. So again, I'm going to put my finger inside. I'm going to make sure that my organs are not going to be cut. You can move those around. It won't damage anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut here. These scissors aren't real sharp. So I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut right around that hip all the way down to nearly to the table. Now you'll see that we need to come back up here where the top nipple is, and I'm going to reach under the flap and I'm going to lift so I don't cut any of these organs. I'm going to lift and I'm going to cut. And notice I'm kind of curving down this way as I cut. That's because there's ribs here and they can become difficult to cut through. So we're going to cut right down like so. And you have now opened up your abdominal cavity. As you can see, we've got some fluid in the bottom of our dissecting tray. You'll have different amounts of fluid, but this stuff can be obnoxious smelling. This is the preservative. So one of the best ways to help keep things from smelling in your classroom is to take your pig over to your sink. But before you do that, what you want to do is you want to take any of your dissecting tools and you want to take them out of your tray, because we're going to leave the pig in the tray and we're going to rinse them off in the tray. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our pig over to the sink. And all we're going to do is put the portion we're going to rinse down in the sink, just like so. So you can, as you can see, the pig in this sink doesn't fit real well, but it'll still work. So I'm going to turn my water on very low, very slowly. You can see how slowly I'm turning this faucet because we don't want water spraying everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bit more water. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hand to rinse around and move things around. And this is all okay to move around. You'll notice I'm not removing anything, I'm just rinsing. So get a bit of water in there, and then what you're going to do is you're going to hold your pig like this, and you're just going to pour that fluid out. You'll notice there's lots of discoloration there. That's all the preservatives. So we want to get as much of that out as we can. So rinse a second time. Move those organs around a bit so we can get stuff rinsed out of there, and then pour it out a second time, making sure you have as much, turn off your water, making sure you have as much water drained out as possible, holding onto your pig so it doesn't slide. Then you're going to set it down. You're going to make sure that your yarn is in place. Scoot your pig out, back up towards his head, up towards the top if you need to, so your yarn doesn't come out from under. Then you're going to take your yarn and squeegee it off so it's not all soaking wet. And you're going to put it back into your tray before you go back to your table. Before you go back to your table, it's also a good idea to take a paper towel and kind of dab things around. So dry off the inside of your tray, maybe dry off a bit of your pig as well. Just like so. You'll notice again, we're moving things around, not being rough with it, but I'm not worrying about being too gentle either. So we're going to dry underneath our flaps over here. I'm going to take my paper towel and throw it away. So I'm going to bring this back over to my table so I can continue my dissection. You'll notice the head is towards me. We're going to rotate that around so the head is away from me because we are going to open the chest cavity. Inside the chest cavity, we'll find the heart and the lungs. So that's actually a pretty cool thing to see. So we're going to make sure our pig is nicely squared up. For this, again, we're not going to use our scalpel because we only needed that to make our initial cuts. So we're going to go again to our scissors. And what we're going to do, now that you've identified this organ here, this big blue organ, this is our liver. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't cut the liver, but we're going to go up above the liver through the diaphragm. So you'll notice I took my scissors, took the bottom portion of my scissors, put it up underneath and lift and cut. And again, go up underneath, lift and cut. And you're cutting through where these ribs come together. So you're going to make sure you go in, lift, and cut. Because if you cut down, you're going to be cutting into organs. I'm going to slide this pig back toward me. And you'll notice that we can begin to see inside of this area here. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to go in, lift, and cut till we're just about at the top of where the pig's front legs would be. Now you'll notice as you begin to cut, the pig's front legs will begin to spread a little easier. We're eventually going to retie those once we're done. So what you want to do is I'm going to turn the pig's head toward my left-hand side, and now I'm going to go down the side, again going into where I've cut, lifting and cutting. And sometimes you're going to get a pair of scissors that aren't so good, but they will still do the job. These ones are pretty dull scissors. We're going to go right over here. Now you can go thin layers or thin cuts. You'll notice when I cut that last couple of cuts, I did not cut through anything but skin, and that's okay. Then you can go back and you can cut a little deeper as well. So we're going to take this right around. You'll feel a shoulder bone there. And then, so we're going to cut just about to the shoulder. Then I'm going to take my pig and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees the other direction. And again, do the same thing, making sure your yarn is out of the way. So we're going to come up under that cavity there and cut. And sometimes it takes a little work. Sometimes it's easier to just go shallow and cut the first layer and then cut a second layer and then cut a third layer. That's quite all right to do, okay? So then I'm going to square my pig back up to me and set my scissors down. I'm going to undo my yarn. The reason why I'm going to undo my yarn is because I can actually spread this pig out a bit. But before I tie this pig back down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands inside where inside each of the front legs, and I'm going to push. The reason why I'm doing that is because it's going to make it much easier than to tie my pig back down and continue this dissection. So I'm going to pull on my yarn from this side. So you'll notice it pulled the arm all the way to this side, and I'm going to pull this arm back over this way, and I'm going to wrap again about 4 or 5 times. There's 3, 4, 5 times. And let's go one more just for security. Then I'm going to take all the rest of my yarn and just tuck it back up towards that top area, getting it out of the way. Now, as you can see, when we look in here, one side or the other is going to open up. So you'll notice that there's this kind of tissue that just tore, just broke. That's okay. Your fingers are very good dissecting tools. If you take your finger and run it along the inside of this body cavity, you can actually come down here and you'll see this barrier right here. This is the diaphragm. You can actually use your finger to tear the diaphragm away from the chest wall. So I'm going to turn it this way a little bit so you can see better. Use my other finger. I'm actually going to tear that away from the chest wall. And when you use your fingers, you can actually keep that entire muscle intact. Whereas if you use scissors, that muscle will not come apart except where you cut it. So when you actually use your fingers, you can actually get the entire muscle together. So let me show you again. I'm going to put my finger in this side. It's a little more difficult. One side's going to be a little easier than the other. So I'm going to lift, I'm going to slide my finger in here and find my diaphragm and pull that diaphragm away just like so. Now you'll notice because we've opened up another cavity, we have another bunch of water, or another bunch of dissecting fluid. So talk to your partner, have them give you another paper towel, another piece of paper towel, and just take that paper towel and just tuck it right in that cavity. You don't have to worry about damaging anything, you won't. And just take the diaphragm and put it down over the liver, and then just put your paper towel inside there and dry that off. Now you're going to find a couple of things in here. You're going to take your paper towel and throw it away. You're going to find a couple of things in here. This part that's laying over the liver that I've got cut, let me get a blunt probe so I can point. I've cut this portion here. This muscle is all one muscle. This is the diaphragm. Now you'll notice I have this big bulging thing in the middle. You should be able to identify what that is. What I'm going to do is it's in a sac, and I'm actually going to use my blunt probe. All right, now let's identify all of these parts that we've exposed. We've talked about a couple of them, but let's start basically from the top. Up here, separating the thoracic and abdominal cavities, that's these two cavities, is this layer that we dissected with our hands. This is the diaphragm. This is what helps you talk, helps you breathe. So it's one giant muscle all the way across. That is the diaphragm. Underneath that is this giant blue thing. The reason why it's blue is because this pig has been injected with latex. This giant organ is one of the largest organs in the body. It's the largest organ inside the body. Skin is actually the largest organ overall. But this is the liver. Underneath the liver can be a little difficult to find. You'll notice on the pig's right-hand side, and we haven't talked about sides, so it's definitely one thing that you need to know. When you look at your pig, his right front leg is his right side, so you always talk about your dissection in reference to the sides of your organism. So you can see right here, there's this little pouch-like structure. That's the gallbladder. That's where bile is stored. It's right there. It should be green. Sometimes they can be kind of hard to find, so you may have to look for that, but that's on the right-hand side. Then we have the spleen, which is this almost looks like a flap right here. And what we can do is it's actually connected. It's held in place by this connective tissue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down my probe and again use my fingers. I'm going to tuck my finger under there and I'm just going to pull on that connective tissue. And you can see my fingers make a great dissection tool, so I can put the spleen out to the side, because underneath the spleen is this bag-like structure. This bag-like structure is the stomach. So this whole big bag here is the stomach. We can actually open that up and I'll show you inside. The only thing that will be inside right now is bile, so it may look kind of black. The stuff that comes out of it may look kind of black. So you can see we'll cut lengthwise through the stomach. And there's liquid in there because we've got dissection fluid in this pig. So you can see how this is just a bag, and you can see how it comes this direction to this tube-like structure. This tube-like structure here leads to the small intestine. So again, this is the stomach. The stomach leads to the small intestine. That's all of the stuff. And it seems kind of odd to call this the small intestine. The reason why it's called the small intestine is because it's narrow around in diameter. So this is a piece of the small intestine. So it's a very long tube-like structure, but it's narrow around. If we were to cut across this, you would see that the cross section of this is very narrow versus the large intestine, which is very large in diameter. So if we take a look at a piece of the small intestine, let me grab a piece out here. You can see, if I lay my glove underneath, you can see how you can see through this area right here. This is called the mesentery. This is how the cells of the small intestine are fed. You can see there's little red lines here. Those are arteries. Those are actually bringing nutrients through these vessels to the cells of the small intestine, feeding those cells, keeping those cells alive. So it all comes from this area here, feeding all of this. So you find mesentery in all of this small intestine. You can find that pretty much anywhere in there. So that is the mesentery. The pancreas is interesting to try to find. What you want to do is you want to go back to the stomach area, and you're actually going to dissect out. Notice I stuck my finger in the stomach, so I want to make sure I have the stomach completely up. And we can continue to go through this soft connective tissue, making sure our spleen stays out of the way. There it is, right there. There's this little curly looking structure right here. That is the pancreas. So the pancreas is right underneath the stomach. The stomach sits right over like this. The spleen sits over like that. So you're going to move the spleen out of the way, lift the stomach, and then you'll take away some of that, that connective tissue. And that, let me uncover it again. This right there, that is the spleen. Excuse me, the pancreas. I apologize. That's the spleen. The spleen lays over the stomach. S. Under the stomach is the pancreas. My apologies. All right, so as we go down the end of, at the end of the small intestine, we have what's called the cecum. The cecum is almost like a dead end branch. It's very difficult to find, so we're not going to worry about the cecum today. So you'll notice here we've got more connective tissue. You know what? There's the cecum right there. That's the cecum. It's a dead end branch. Then the rest of this stuff right here is, you'll notice how it's nice and neatly organized. This is called the colon, otherwise known as the large intestine. The large intestine then connects back here to this tube. This tube-like structure is the rectum. The rectum is then attached to the anus, which is the hole we looked at in the beginning. That's where waste products exit the body. Kind of cool if you take the organs and lay them to the side. Again, we've got our spleen here and our pancreas here. If we look right behind, kind of underneath those, we've got this bulge right here. What we can do is we can actually take our blunt probe and we can go through this connective tissue and we can dissect out that organ. This organ right here. And sometimes it's better sometimes to put your tools down and then go again with your fingers. So you can see how we can get up underneath this organ. This is the kidney. So if you get rid of this connective tissue, you've got to be real gentle on this side. But you can see right here, there's this vessel that's going through here. What happens is the blood from the body comes into the kidney, then runs through the kidney. You can actually dissect the kidney and see parts inside. It'll filter out the blood. The blood will then leave the kidney, and then the filtrate that's left goes down into the bladder, which is here. That's this tube-like structure right there. So that becomes urine and goes into the bladder. So you can see that this pig has a kidney on this side, and before we started dissecting, it looked just like that. So you can also see right here we've got tubes that go down through these pockets down to the testicles. So we've identified the kidney, the umbilical. Oh, this is an umbilical vein here on the side of the bladder. We have another umbilical vein here. Excuse me, I apologize. This is an umbilical. These are red, so they're not veins. This is an umbilical artery. This is an umbilical artery. Red is artery because they carry oxygen-rich blood. Up here, this thing that we cut originally that's coming out of the liver and connecting right about here, that is the umbilical vein. So we have umbilical vein, umbilical arteries. And that should do it for your pig dissection.